Joined by me now are two bioethics experts, Dr. James Downer, head of palliative care at the University of Ottawa and member of the government bioethics table, and Dr. Carrie Bowman, a bioethics professor at University of Toronto School of Medicine. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Now, Dr. Downer, I don't envy the position that you're in. As a physician, I'm sure you've had to deal with some really hard choices. But can you tell me why you support the proposal to suspend family consent for removing a patient from life support?
Well, I think you have to take a step back and understand what is the purpose of healthcare and what a situation we would be in if we were faced with an overwhelming surge in demand for critical care. If you're in a situation where you literally have more critically ill people than you have critically ill resources, someone is not going to get critical care. That's just a simple mathematical fact. We're going to do everything we can to try to make sure that doesn't happen. We've managed to avert it twice now, hoping it won't happen if there is a third wave. But if there is a situation where we literally have more demand than we have supply, really you have only a small number of options for how you can approach that situation. You either wait until all of your beds are full and simply turn away everybody else who comes to your ICU after that. You can use a process of random allocation, essentially randomly assigning who gets critical care and who doesn't. Or you can come up with a more rational approach where you try to prioritize people who have a higher chance of benefiting from critical care and surviving if they get it, as opposed to people who are very likely to die regardless of whether they get critical care or not. The argument is that if you're prioritizing resources for people who are more likely to survive, that at the end of all of this, you will ultimately be giving critical care to more people will survive, fewer people will die. Also doing so in a very rational and explicit manner with clear, explicit rules so that you don't run the risk or you try to mitigate the risk that triage decisions might be made on the basis of things that are not relevant for deciding on mortality risk, so that people will not be discriminated against on the basis of race, disability, etc. And those, I think, are really important principles that we're trying to apply.
Now, Dr. Bowman, can you respond to that? I know that you're opposed to this proposal to suspend family consent for end of life. Can you articulate why?
Yeah, well, first of all, if we're talking about the protocols themselves, I really, really get it. This has to happen.
You mean the triage protocols, right?
The triage protocols. So as we speak, and as other speakers have said, these two things are not the same, but they're quite related. Triage protocols really, really, as difficult as they are, have to proceed. If we don't have triage protocols, we may actually lose more people. As Dr. Downer has said, first come, first serve is really not going to work. But I have many, many doubts. The suspension of the Healthcare Consent Act, I think, is really extreme. And my greatest concern, being a person that has spent a lot of my life working in critical care units, wonderful people, wonderful, positive environment, is it can't be done well. And I would worry it would really be very inconsistent. That it could fracture, and it's an extreme measure to take this kind of protective constitutional right away from people. I think you're opening up some extreme vulnerabilities. I would be very opposed to it.
Now, Dr. Downer, I think Dr. Bowman is right. It's an extreme measure, but is an extreme measure warranted if this is an extreme situation?
I want to clarify. I think if you're proposing to do this in a disorganized manner with no rules or criteria around them, then I would agree with Dr. Bowman. I think that would be a very bad idea to try to sort of have people make bedside decisions based on whatever they can see around them without any guidance or consistency. I think is a very bad idea. What's being proposed in this situation is, in a case of triage, and this is consistent around the world, is that you're simply applying the same criteria to every critically ill person, whether they're already in the unit or simply arriving at the unit de novo. You're applying consistent criteria. In fact, I would say it's very important to include this as a part of a triage protocol for a variety of reasons, the most important of which is that it actually enables you to delay and potentially never initiate triage. So if, for example, if I know that once somebody is in the ICU, I cannot withdraw and I can only triage at the point of entry, I actually have to start triaging when I still have empty beds. There's no point in starting triage when you have no beds left. If I know that there is the option potentially to withdraw, if I have to, then I can continue offering critical care right up until the very last moment until literally the last bed is full. And if I'm withdrawing or if I'm limiting critical care in any
Dr.
way,
Downer.
I'm doing it in a highly consistent manner and only as much as I have to.